issue. With that said, I'd like to introduce my partner, Eric. Why don't you join us and take it away?
Thanks, Rob. Thanks so much. Yeah, we have a good show today. We are working today with Jesse Channon, who is the Chief Commercial Officer for the Cannabist Company, formerly known as Columbia Care. Jesse, come on in and join us.
Hey, Eric, how are you?
Nice. Doing great. How are you today?
I'm hanging in there. Thanks.
Love the little dispensary setup behind you. That looks cool.
Yep. Anytime you make your basement look like a dispensary, you usually make your wife really happy. So I was excited to do it.
Excellent. Excellent. So Jesse, we're going to jump in. We're going to get, as we always do here, we're going to take a deep dive into brand strategies and with, as it relates to the Cannabist Company. But just for the viewers, I think most people know all about your company, but give us a little snapshot in terms of, intro and background and where you are, how many states you're in, and what's the latest.
Yeah, wow. So the Cannabist Company, formerly Columbia Care, we operate in 16 states, 86 dispensaries, about 35 cultivation and manufacturing facilities across the country. On the retail side, we operate around 9 different banners, with the flagship being Cannabist. We also operate under G-Leaf, The Green Solution, Medicine Man, Patriot Care, Capital City Care, SWC, Project Cannabis, and THCSD. We also have a handful or so of our own brands, right? So sort of our first-party brands that we bring to the market on the product side, headlined primarily by the ones that people know the most: 777, Seed and Strain, and Classics, with Amber on the concentrate side, Heady, and Press as well. So that's the sort of the high level on us. And we're one of the oldest operators in the space. I think that's one of the things outside of footprint and having one of the most diversified retail footprints, especially when you think about, sort of the typical consolidation for most multi-state operators is usually very heavy in Florida and Illinois as a percentage of their sort of retail footprint. We operate over 70 dispensaries outside of those markets. So, excited to be able to jump on and talk a little bit more about what's going on with the business.
Great. No, I mean, I've always found in my dealings with formerly known as Columbia Care, now the Cannabist Company, that you were one of the MSOs that truly valued brands, right? I mean, you did acquire Project Cannabis in California that had the 777, the Classics, Amber, you mentioned Seed and Strain, but you've always been brand centric as a company. You announced a merger with Cresco a couple years ago that was also probably one of the most brand centric MSOs. Now, I'm sure there was a lot of brand integration discussions during that period when that deal was still moving forward. But now that you remain an independent company, how has your overall brand strategy shifted or evolved?
I don't know if it's shifted or evolved. I think it's definitely evolved in a sense of the way that we sort of look at some of those partnerships. I think probably some of the ways that we evaluate them, right? We've had some good learnings with regards to that. The way that we structure them moving forward, I think, we want to be good partners. And I think as a good partner, you have to try to create the most strategic advantage and the most upside for everyone involved. So a big part of that is making sure that our brand partners are set up for success. So I think those things have evolved. Our sort of position, our strategic outlook on brands was a little bit different, right, than Cresco's. So I think the 18 months or so that we were in the sort of integration / combination conversations, some of that fell away as far as, how aggressive we were in pursuing third-party brand partnerships and developing our own brands. I think what you're seeing is a lot of that's coming back to life now as we return more towards, our strategy, to your point, as a standalone. I don't really come from a CPG background. I've had the incredible opportunity to work with some of the brightest and best marketers in the world on the other side of the table when we were building ad tech solutions and services and sort of doing agency work. I got to spend a lot of time with those minds. And the one lesson that I took away from the ones that I always had the most appreciation for was to try to be as customer centric as you can. Right? Like, it's great to push innovation. It's great to try to get out in front of things. It's great to try to, pave new road and create things that you think will evolve customer expectations as well. Right? So it's, sort of the old Ford quote of if I would have asked my customers, they would have wanted faster horses, right? So there's nothing wrong with innovation and evolving those expectations. But I think when it comes to brands in our space, you have to be customer centric. You got to put the consumer in the middle of it and say, what is it that they really want? What are the things that attract them most to these brand architectures? And, how authentic do they feel? How real do they feel? Are we doing a good job of sort of meeting them where they are right now? And so I think that's probably at the root of why we've taken, a slightly different approach, I think, to some of the brand building exercises that we've done.
So you came out of, you said you moved on, mutual decision to move on with Cresco, and you said, okay, we got to refocus our brands. The first thing you did was you changed the name of your company, right? You changed the name of the company from Columbia Care to The Cannabist. That was the first brand move. Talk a little bit about that and the rationale behind it and what you wanted that customer at the center of the ecosystem to feel about the new brand, The Cannabist Company.
So I think for that to make sense, we got to go back in time a few years, right? So when I first started in this job, Columbia Care, we were in a number of states, a much smaller footprint, much smaller store count than we are today. I remember traveling to a couple of the markets, and you would drive down the road and you'd see a sign for Columbia Care, and I would always joke around. I'd be like, I don't know what that company does. Like, I'm not sure, like an insurance company, is that like, I don't know what, I know what they don't do. They definitely don't sell weed. I don't know what they do. And so we would always joke around. And so when we rebranded the retail back in 21 to Cannabist, right? We wanted it to be unapologetic. We wanted it to be very obvious who we are, what we do, what we stand for, right? Like, we don't sell all plants, we sell a plant. And we named the retail after the people. And I think that was a really powerful moment, right? Like, to call something Cannabist, you're naming it after the people that are inside those four walls. And we wanted it to be a focus on our team and how passionate and, sort of excited they are to share their education and their passion for the plant. So when we came out of the Cresco, we had always wanted to rebrand the whole thing. And obviously for 18 months, it was like, well, we're definitely not going to do that. That'd be a waste of resources, right? When we're about to be acquired, and things would ultimately be changing to Cresco. When we came out of that break, it was like, all right, how fast can we do it? Like, how quickly can we move to go ahead and execute on something that we've always known we wanted to do? And I always joke around, we had a bit of a cheat code because we had already launched Cannabist. We knew that people liked it. We knew that it performed well in feedback with consumers and guests. We knew that the teammates loved it, right? And for me, this rebrand as a parent company was as much, if not more, for our team than it was for any other sort of constituency. We needed a platform that we felt like was more aligned with who we are today and who we're going to be tomorrow. So Columbia Care was the brand that got us to where we are. It was enterprise, it was medical focused, it was great on an application to get licenses. Cannabist is who we are today and who we're going to be tomorrow. There's no question about it. So that was really, we knew we wanted to do it. So we weren't exactly reinventing the wheel. And as soon as we were given the opportunity, it was one of the first things we tackled.
So as everybody knows, we like to take a deep dive into your partnership model with third-party brands, and we're going to get there right in 1 second. But to set the table, everyone always asks, these MSOs, they're vertically integrated. They want to control all the shelf space with as many of their brands as they possibly can in their flower. What is your, do you have like a set in stone objective in terms of how much shelf space the Cannabist Company wants to have in your stores versus third-party brands, and how do you think about that? Because ultimately there is a percentage of your shelf space that is available for third-party brands, and we're going to talk about how brands might endeavor to get on those shelves.
I think that there's always guideposts, right? And it's more market by market, depending on where they are, medical versus adult use, how mature the market is, what that assortment looks like from a SKU point of view. I think that there's definitely guideposts that most of us go by with regards to like what percentage of shelf is going to be owned versus third party. I think that to make that percentage too high is probably a mistake if you're putting the customer in the middle of the decision. If you're putting some margin implications and stuff, it's probably a different conversation, right? But I think that there's a very specific reason why there is no product brand called Cannabist. There's not. And as long as I'm in this seat, which, could get thrown out tomorrow, you never know, right? There won't be. And the only state where you see that name on a bottle is Florida, because it's required by packaging regs, right, from the OMMU. That retail platform should be our expression to the consumer of what we think is the best, right? And part of that is understanding that there are beautiful third-party brands and products all over this country, and they're spreading quickly. Probably not quickly enough. If you're a consumer, probably not fast enough. But we should be doing everything that we can to usher those great brands into our markets and to put them in front of our consumers, because I think that creates a retail platform that you want to come back to time and time again, because that there's going to be great things that are aligned to all of the different things that you may be looking at from a lifestyle point of view or a product expectation point of view. Our first party brands should compete for that shelf space. They shouldn't be granted that shelf space simply because they exist. And we strive every day internally to build brand architectures and from a product quality and a manufacturing and a cultivation point of view to compete for that shelf space. And that is how we view it internally. And we're gonna stick to that. And that means that in some markets, we probably have one of the higher percentages. As far as a multi-state operator, a vertical multi-state operator, we probably have some of the higher percentages of third-party product on shelf, because we remain committed to putting the best available on shelf. And that is going to continue to be our outlook.
Nice. So variety, the spice of life, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so let's start again. We're dive in how you're partnering with these brands. Do you have kind of an overarching thesis of what it means to partner with a third-party brand? What's the philosophy going into that partnership with those third-party brands?
To not be as bad as we have been in the past as an MSO, right? I think that's the philosophy, and I say that for a couple of reasons. I've been very fortunate to be approached with some incredible opportunities for partnership, and some of which we were in the midst of trying to launch and weren't able to get across the finish line because of the integration, right? That sort of pause period. But I look back at something like Tyson, right? When we launched Tyson, or relaunched, I guess, Tyson 2.0, right? That partnership started as a very flexible one. They have an incredible management team. They obviously have a very authentic brand ambassador for the space, for the industry. But Adam Wilkes, the CEO over there, and Chad Bronstein, their chairman, they came with a very flexible, very adaptive approach to this. Hey, we know we've got something here. We think we have a great brand. We don't know exactly what products are going to resonate. We don't know exactly what architecture is going to resonate. What do you guys want to do as an operating partner? And so, look, we learned a lot of lessons with them. And I think the number one lesson that I walked away with was it's really tough to be a multi-state brand. It's really hard because some of what you do competes directly, theoretically, with what I do from a vertical point of view of having all these mouths to feed and, first party brands carrying a higher margin. You want to create brands, you want to have lines in the water from a CPG point of view, to try to be a top 3 brand in every category. That makes it difficult to be a multi-state brand when you're working just off a straight licensing deal. Our hope, and what we are engaged in conversations right now with our partners, is to provide them a more strategic partnership framework that gives them more control over their own destiny and doesn't put them in direct competition with our operations team, puts them sort of in their own space. And I think that has been received overwhelmingly positive. I think people find it incredibly refreshing. Is there a push and a pull there? So is there a give and a take from our side and from their side? There is, but that's what good partnerships are built off of. So I think when you talk about what have we learned, what's evolved, it's the structures to those partnerships and the very candid feedback that we provide them right from the beginning. Hey, been there, done this. We know we have a pretty good idea of what's going to work and pretty good idea of what's not. And we're not going to take you down a road that we know is going to end with less success. We'll put it that way, right? So that's what's changed.
I think that's interesting because I think a lot of brands are, when they partner with you, they come in, they said, guys, I've heard we need to move the needle. We really need to move the needle, and we need to be, to really garner market share with the Cannabist Company to be on their shelves. Is that true? Is it, I mean, that's one line of thinking, but is that something that, you would look at a partnership and say, yeah, they didn't move the needle, we got to move them out, or they did move the needle, now let's move them into the other 15 states? Is that a critical success factor in a relationship?
I'm still not convinced that any of us know what the needle is. So, when you say, I just think we put a lot of pressure on some of these brands to come in and say, we're going to do this, and it's like, I don't know if that's really fair. Again, I think the right approach to take to these is let's learn together. So let's test and iterate. Let's learn together. Let's see if we can do something special. And if we can, then it moves the needle for everyone. But I think it's a very selfish perspective. And again, maybe this is my soft spot being a startup guy in my past, but I think it's a very selfish perspective as a large MSO to, come to people and say, well, what are you going to do for me? How are you going to move the needle for me? This is the things that you have to do. I think it's more like, okay, what do you think you can do? What are your goals? What are the things that you're focused on? What is the value that you think you bring to a consumer that's different than what they're getting from our portfolio today, right? And if there's something there, let's explore that. And that means that needle could move a little bit or a lot of bit, that's okay, right? As long as we're all moving in a positive direction, for me right now, that's good enough, because so much of this industry is still yet to be defined. And so if you're building concepts and structures off of the needles of today, I think you're going to miss out on a lot of the upside of this industry in 3 to 4 years.
So would you say that the analysis, a brand comes to you, obviously you look at that, what's the product market fit, but there are other factors that are more important than moving the needle. What would be like, would authenticity be one? Like where are you on, like what are you looking for, right? To begin with, what resonates, like what passes the sniff test?
Authenticity, the team, the things that they're focused on, what matters to them, why they're in it, what are they doing? There's a lot of factors there. Do they have something novel or something interesting that is not something that we've seen before, or it's better than something that we've seen before? I mean, I'll give you a great example. Recent announcements, when you talk about like recent partnership announcements, right? So, we're the team that launched Tyson, which was one of the fastest and broadest third-party product launches in the industry's history. And we also just partnered with Buttercake out of Delaware and have now moved them into additional markets. Those two brands could not be more different, right? But their founding teams have something very similar, and that is that they want to make great products for consumers that consumers will rally behind and be interested in, and they all had their own sort of special novel approach to it, right? So, Buttercake comes from a history of creating these baked goods and have sort of this like rabid loyal following, and they wanted to do more. They wanted to be in more SKUs and have more different form factors, which is what we're launching with them in other markets. Whereas Tyson was like, we have a story to tell, and we think that story will resonate with a consumer base that you're not reaching right now. By the way, I totally agree, right? And so, when Mike talks about his struggles and what cannabis meant to his life, he's a polarizing figure. I don't approve of everything that he's done in his past by any means. But when you think about someone coming out and saying, this has been a mental health investment for me, there's a lot of other people in this country who are struggling from similar issues that when he says it, it means something and it resonates, and they go out and they try these products and maybe they find some relief. So that authenticity and that sort of purpose-driven reason goes a long way, I think, when we evaluate brands.
Nice. So let's get down to some of the practical responsibilities when you're talking to a brand about, hey, we're going to put you on the shelf and this is the market we're going to be in, or it's a multi-market launch. What are the things that you would expect the brand is going to bring to the table in a partnership with Cannabist? Is it, the below the line marketing? Well, what are the must-haves? Like, you guys better activate, or what are the things that you're looking for from that brand partner?
I don't come to any of the conversations with a rigid set of expectations. I don't, because they're all capable of different things. I think we as multi-state operators have a responsibility to flip that conversation around and provide an incubator setting for these brands to thrive, and provide them with a suite of services that we can afford that they may not be able to. right off the rip to try to help them be successful. So you don't have a sales team, that's okay. We have a sales team. We can figure something out, right? You don't have marketing, that's okay. We have a marketing team. You don't know how to buy digital advertising, we do. We can figure that out, right? So there are things that we can do as an operator that we should be bringing to that equation so that they can build a model, they can build their business, they can start to get to a point of view where they can reinvest in themselves, and then they can build some of those things for their own. And I think that comes into structure, and it comes into how we position these partnerships, how we set up the financials, a number of different things that we can do to ensure that in 3 to 5 years, when we're living in a very different world from a normalized point of view for this industry, have we done enough as an operator to help more of these brands become successful and be positioned for success? And if the answer is no, I don't think we're going to be one of the most favorably viewed MSOs. If the answer is yes, I think people come into our retail platform. I think people are excited by the things that we're doing. And I think we have great partners that are telling people you should work with this company or you should come in and buy products from them. And that to me feels like a better result.
That's a tremendous answer. I mean, I think that what it seems like you'll do then in your stores is obviously you've got access to a lot of fantastic data. So you could have a brand that was targeting a very narrow demographic. And if those customers absolutely love that brand, you're not kicking them off the shelf for any reason. I mean, there's no move the needle discussion. It's if you put the customer at the center of the decision-making process and they fall in love with the brand for whatever reason, effect, authenticity, messaging, that is a fantastic partner for you, and one that you can look at and say, if people love it in Florida, maybe they'll like it in Chicago, but and if not, how do you tailor the products to the market? So I mean, it sounds like a pretty data-driven approach, mixed with, of course, the proper level of oversight of like, what do you feel in the heart and science, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think it's been, when you talk about evolution, right? Like the 2019 conversation was probably, why would we have this brand in the dispensary? It competes with our edible. The 2021 conversation was probably, how do we make our edible better to compete directly with this brand that we've brought in, right? I think the 2023 conversation is, should we be making edibles that are the same as theirs, or should we just be having a more strategic partnership with theirs to bring them all over the country because the consumers love them? And let's focus R&D and other things on some other areas where we think that we can be an industry leader, right? So as opposed to being spread a mile wide and an inch deep and just trying to be good at everything, why don't we be great in as many things as we possibly can and then focus on having great partners? That to me feels like a really solid plan.
So product market fit, right? Let's talk a little bit about that, because what you basically said here is that there are situations where you do all the analysis and you're like, geez, this gummy product is going to price exactly where our gummy products are, it fits, and but that's not a non-starter, right? There's a lot of different ways to consider the validity and the upside of a relationship. So when you look at like this product market fit, like, do you rank the importance of the different things that you're doing and say, product market fit is not necessarily the first one, or people love to talk about that back in your tech days. So this idea that you compete with other brands and you've got to kind of create a gold, silver, bronze type of structure. It doesn't sound like that's really a driver, or at least a firm, like, non-starter.
I think I think that has to come into play, right? Like I don't want to make it sound like we just sit in a room and take every contrarian position possible, right? Where it's like, we're not going to do that. It's like, no, some of these things make a whole lot of sense and we're going to do those, right? So there are some best practices to running a vertically integrated company. There are some best practices to running a retail platform that we absolutely subscribe to, because if we didn't, we'd probably be out of business. So I think there are some things that we definitively do. I think what we try to do is we try to balance that as much as possible with these other conversations of, is there another lens? Is there another way to look at this? Like, challenge yourself to get outside of the comfort zone of what it is that we know and believe today based on the consumers in the industry that we serve today. because tomorrow for this industry is going to look very different, right? We know that as markets move from early medical to mature medical to early recreational to mature recreational and adult use, the segmentation of those products change, right? So we see a rise in things like vaporization edibles, ingestibles, all of these sort of like more nuanced products. Share of flower typically comes down a bit, right? But that's all predicated off of a consumer indexing that exists today that may not be, and when I say may, definitively will not be, what we serve in 2028. So as we see more normalization, we see the emergence of more audiences that will come into our space. Those will over-index away from the core consumer of today, which we have to keep into consideration. We serve a core consumer today that will still be there. The percentage of sales that they make up will probably compress, which creates an incredible opportunity to continue to do things to serve that core consumer base while also putting some new things to try to inspire adoption from these net new consumers. And we know that they will over-index more than likely into a different set of products than today's sort of legacy or core consumer does. So that means that when we're going through these conversations, we have to have one eye on the reality and the present of where we are today. And we have to have one eye out on the horizon saying, but should we be doing more to prepare for a world that we know is going to be different? And I think that's what we really try to do internally.
That's very cool. I mean, I'll use the analogy of the tail wagging the dog, but in a positive way. Like, you're really learning from these niche brands or their value proposition, what they stand for, and saying, come on, let's embrace that because we're going to learn from this, right? I mean, I think that's fascinating. Look, so in this market today, there are a lot of brands that are struggling. Okay, and getting on shelves like yours is a major boost to their business. But when they come into you and you look at their products and you look at their value proposition, you say, I really like that. The question I have is, how much due diligence do you need to do on that brand? Because they're struggling, and some of them, let's be real. I mean, there is an extinction event going on in California as an example, but, you know, brands that are teetering, you know, do you have to take a deep dive? And obviously it's not mergers and acquisitions due diligence, but do you need to really check out their financial health to make sure that they're going to be a good partner and can sustain? And if you don't do, you know, what does that due diligence look like before you agree to a deal with a partner?
I look at it in two stages. So the first sort of layer of due diligence has nothing to do with the financial, right? So I think you almost have to put blinders on. You have to say, okay, I'm going to be a consumer right now. I'm going to look at this brand. Is there something here that excites me? Is there something that I love about this brand, this story, this product set, whatever it may be? If it passes that litmus test, let's go deeper. What I hate is wasting people's time. I don't like going down a rabbit hole being like, great, let's dive into the financials, when it's like, you know what, honestly, this is just not really, I don't really believe in this. It's not a fit, or it's just not aligned with what it is that we're trying to do in this specific segment, right? There are a ton of great brands out there right now that are struggling, in air quotes, literally for no fault of their own. It's just, some of the models are broken. The industry is not in the best place right now from a capital markets point of view and a sort of an investor point of view and a number of others. So it's tough to get capital. You know, if 2 or 3 or 4 things would have gone differently over the last 3 years, we wouldn't be having this conversation about some of these brands, right? So it's, look, the sort of asymmetric upside for these brands is still there. It's just they're having to navigate through a much longer storm on the sea right now than they were planning. So it's like, you know, they went into this knowing that they were going into a storm, and, you know, they got their boats ready. They were not planning on that storm being 5 years. So they have run out of supplies, and everybody's trying to figure out, is there somewhere where we can park this boat to weather the storm, and then we'll come out the other side. And there is another side, by the way. Like, we will come out of this on the other side. There are better days ahead for this industry. There's no question. I don't think, other than AI and potentially DeFi, I don't think there's many other spaces right now where you're going to see a rising tide that's going to lift all boats to the extent that you're going to see with cannabis over the next 5 years. And so if you believe that, these brands just have to find a way to survive. Just survive to 25 is the theme right now for a brand, right? So if you buy into that, you have to find partners that you pass the first litmus test. And look, I'm not the only one. There are a bunch of great MSOs out there that should be having conversations with brands, and many of them I know are, just like this. And do you fit inside of what we believe is our strategy, our portfolio, our thoughts around what's important to the consumer based on our data-driven or our sort of directional information, right? If you pass that, then great, we'll dive in. Let's understand more about your team. Let's understand more about your financial position. Let's talk very candidly about what your struggles have been. Why is it that you're not doing great, right? I probably already know 80% of it, but let's see if there's something that I don't know about your brand in particular. And then let's go from there. Let's see if we can put you in a position to win. And I think that's what the conversation should be right now.
Nice. Just reminding everyone, a couple good questions coming in. We will take those questions at around 15 minutes before the hour, so keep them coming. But for right now, let's talk about the financial relationship with these people, the royalty rate, right? What are the things that change if someone comes in and says, well, hey, I'm Tyson. Do you understand? I'm Tyson. I'm getting 20% royalty, versus, someone else saying, boy, if I could just get mailbox checks for $5 and what goes into the discussion around the economic model for partnering? And it sounds to me, I'm going to guess that you folks actually look very carefully around the benefit to your partners for how much money they can make in a relationship with you, because that's how ultimately they are also going to evaluate the success of the partnership. So what goes into that? What suggestions do you have for brands that are negotiating with you the royalty rate?
First of all, one of the reasons why I love the Tyson team so much is that they've never come into a conversation and been like, we're Tyson, right? Like I'll start there. There have been others that I have spoken with that have come in that way, and none of them have ever launched a product in my portfolio. So I think that we all need to be humble and give each other sort of a bit of grace here through this process if we're all figuring it out. And we don't know what some of the biggest brands are going to be. There's tons of data out there about like, this is the #1 brand. Every one of them comes with 16 asterisks from systems like BDSA or Headset or others that are like, well, we're only measuring these 3 things and it doesn't include this state and it doesn't include these markets because there's not enough data. It's like, okay, so no one actually really is reporting on what is what, right? With regards to like, what is the biggest brands, the brands that have the highest brand equity, that have the highest return shopping, all of that, that's all still TBD. So that's a huge opportunity for these brands, for multi-state brands, to put a line in the water and know that it is still wide open right now. So if you come to me, I can't speak for everyone in the industry, but if you come to me and you say, we're so-and-so, I'm going to say, that's amazing. You know who's going to love you? Somebody else. It's not going to be. Yeah, but if you come to us saying, hey, we think we've got something special here. We think we got a great brand. We've got some good data. I think we've got some traction. I think we could be an incredible complement to your portfolio. Here's how we see ourselves fitting in. Does that make sense to you? What do you think? That is a conversation that 100% of the time will get you attention and an answer from me. No question. Whether or not it ends up in us doing something together, different story. But you will at least get the full review, right? So I think, look, that's the position that brands and operators should be taking right now is we're all figuring this out. Let's figure it out together. Where do you think you're strong? Where do you think you're weak? Let's see if these puzzle pieces sort of fit, and we'll go from there.
Nice, nice. We do have a question that's along these lines, right? And the question was, are you looking for unique products and unique formulations, or is it driven more by the success of those brands in their home state or out-of-state brands?
Both. Consumers vote with their wallet. So if you've had great success in a single state, home state, whatever it may be, I think, first of all, congratulations. That's not easy to do. And second of all, that's a huge vote of confidence in more or less how you will probably be adopted in other places, right? If you have not had that success yet, that's okay. Sometimes you just have something in your mind or innovative or new or whatever it may be that just hasn't had time to click. I'd still love to know about it. So whether it is a novel form, an innovative product, something really interesting in the way that you're thinking about the space, or you're a top 3 brand in your category in a home state and you really want to try to figure out a way to get out of there and into another dozen states, those are both good conversations.
Yeah. So there's third-party brands or legacy brands or single state brands, right? And then there's also brands that have been developed by your quasi competitors, other MSOs, that sometimes you partner with them, sometimes you don't. What is the difference between how you look at an MSO partnership versus what we'll just call a legacy brand or a single state operator brand?
I actually look at them pretty similar, but I think they're different opportunities, right? So the MSO brands are, okay, they don't need anything from us. They just need to be on our shelf, right? Like if we're being honest, right? Like, great brands at other MSOs. So like if we're talking with, like our friends over at Verano or at Air or, take your pick, wherever, right? They've got great brands, great quality products, whatever it may be. It's sort of like we have a home for those, right? Like our consumers are going to love those, so long as we believe it's a great brand, a great form factor, et cetera, right? When we're talking about these third-party brands, more often than not right now, it's a very different conversation. They're not coming to us saying, we're all set. We got everything that we need. So we just need orders. That happens. Like we see some of that and we buy it, right? We merchandise those products. Most of the brand conversations that we're having right now, they are looking for a cultivation, manufacturing, or strategic partner, or they're trying to consolidate onto a single platform versus many platforms. So they may have like 3 or 4 or 5 states that they're in, but it's with a different partner in every state. And they're like, man, it would be a lot easier if it was one partner. So we get a lot of those conversations brought to us from the brands. So, I mean, if you're an MSO, you're still competing for shelf space, right? And the good news for consumers is I'm not a big, like, they're a competitor, so we're not going to say anything nice about them. There's some incredible products that are coming out of these other MSOs, great, high quality, good products. I live in a state where I shouldn't have any of those products, so I won't say that, whether or not there are some in my office right now, but there are great products produced by other MSOs that are absolutely worth having on the shelf. If you're a consumer, you want to see those products, and so we remain committed to making sure that they have a home.
And what about social equity brand partnerships, right?
Yeah.
Is that something that has its own category, its own box?
No, because I think it does a disservice to those brands to say like, oh, you're in your own category, your own box. I will tell you it's probably a +5, right? Like if you show up and you're like, we are trying to make this happen, we're trying to make this work, we'd love to do something, we've got X, Y, and Z, right? And you're fully prepared for the conversation and you have a brand and a position, you're going to get evaluated exactly the same way, right? Meritocracy, you're going to get evaluated exactly the same way as any of those other products. But I mean, just candidly, I'll probably have a bit more respect for where you are in the process, because it's probably been tougher than being one of the legacy MSOs that has access to a ton of resources and capital historically. So it probably just gets you a conversation quicker and an evaluation a bit faster, because their time is probably more valuable. They've got a lot going on and they need to make decisions very quickly. So we prioritize those conversations.
Nice. So one thing that's interesting is there are markets where, you don't have, dozens of retail outlets, right? You actually have to compete in the wholesale market. I think California would be one. I know there's some others where you're really, living and dying by your ability to wholesale your brands into third-party dispensaries.
Yeah.
Just explain a little bit about your wholesale strategy. Is that really core to what you're doing, or is that something that, I mean, a lot of MSOs have shut down their wholesale strategy. You have not. Talk to us a little bit about how that comes together.
Yeah, we're on the contrary, we're leaning in. So we, coming out of the Cresco integration, we had plans to build a fairly sophisticated wholesale organization, really focused on more enterprise partnership management and relationship management, buying and selling. We paused that because obviously we were in conversations with one of the most sophisticated and scaled wholesalers in the space. So that would have been pretty redundant, right, for us to build something that they ultimately then had to absorb. When the transaction didn't take place, we just dusted off the playbook and went right back into what we were doing. So we have since spun up a dedicated wholesale organization led by an incredible senior executive, Steve Burton, from our sort of legacy G-Leaf acquisition. And he's overseeing a team of sellers and buyers across the country. And, we're having great success because it's not something that we've really focused on in the past. We've always been sort of the retail team. And now from a wholesale point of view, it's really interesting because a lot of these partners and trade partners are like, look, we want into that footprint. So how do we do this? How do we make it work? How do we start to get, you know, more balanced in our approach to buying and selling? So we've had great success from a wholesale point of view. When it comes to local markets, I look at somewhere like in New Jersey, where you know, we have a team member. He'll probably be mad at me for calling him out by name, but we have a team member, Jonathan Beal, in New Jersey, who I'm pretty sure is sleeping in his car. He's on the road constantly. Every time I'm on LinkedIn, I see a picture of him in another dispensary. There's so many dispensaries opening. That's incredibly exciting. Like, we love that sort of marketplace where we can be a scaled and reliable provider of product to, you know, social equity or MSO retail operators, right? So wholesale is a huge part of what we're doing moving forward. I feel really good about where we are. Is wholesale going to be what it was 2 or 3 years ago? Probably not, right? The industry's focused more on verticality, especially the MSOs, with regards to having a larger share of shelf for their own products. So it makes the conversations a little bit tougher. But on the flip side, you have all of these markets that are getting more fragmented, that have more, you know, sort of social equity or 1, 2, 3 location retail. That it's an incredible opportunity to build relationships there and be a reliable partner for them. So we'll see, but we are dedicated to it and we're leaning into it, no question.
It's fascinating that I think, you know, you're somewhat unique amongst the MSOs, that you have a really dedicated wholesale strategy, which is going to do 2 things. It's going to have you learn a lot about how to kind of engage the market, and then those learnings can come back in, and, you know, they can call you up and say, you know, this is the challenges we're facing dealing with retailers or even vertically integrated retailers in other states. How are we having those discussions internally? What are we doing? Because maybe there's learnings. I mean, if you're truly integrated in that sense, you're floating both boats, so to speak. Both entities are learning and getting better because you're watching your wholesale team, in some cases, struggle with certain aspects of building their wholesale business, and maybe that is brand related or the threat of an MSO, what have you. But the nice thing I'm hearing is that there's a real, you know, connection that you can both develop and make yourselves better on each side of the house.
No question.
Yeah. So I've talked to a few brands that say the reason why I don't approach MSOs is because I've heard that I'm gonna go in there, I'm an expert in this one thing, and I'm going to teach them exactly how to do my product, and then they're gonna take my IP and they're gonna kick me out.
Yep.
What would you say to first?
That sucks. I'm sorry that we have that reputation. I'm sorry that, you know, people think that. I hope it doesn't stop people from reaching out to us. You know, I come from like I mentioned, I come from a technology startup background, and that's a fear that you constantly live with as a startup, right? And eventually I think you learn a lesson when you've been through enough of them, which is that part of what makes your idea special is you. And replicating a great idea is actually really difficult. So if you have a great idea, if you have something that makes you or your product special or unique, it's actually a lot more difficult to copy it and to clone it than you think. That being said, I'm sure there are tons of people, there are cautionary tales. You don't need me to tell you, Google it. There are cautionary tales in every industry for where you put your trust, how you do things. I really am focused on building an incubator for success for brands. That is, you know, I was fortunate enough to be a part of a Y Combinator company back in spring of 2011. One of my best friends was the co-founder of that company and got accepted. And so the program, you know, seeing that and seeing the support and the incubation that was given to those companies to try to make sure that they were set up for success has always stuck with me. And it's always been my sort of dream to be able to do something like that in an industry like cannabis, right? To be able to sort of help to usher those things in. You can protect yourself to an extent with some documentation, right? With some NDAs, with having the right sort of partnerships. But you also just have to find people that you feel like have an aligned sort of sense of, you know, purpose, I guess, that they're not going to want to steal your ideas. I can tell you when you run an equation for build versus buy, right now in our space, I think that people are going to find out it's better just to partner with incredibly innovative people and create a marketplace of great founders and great innovators and great products than it is to try to be a multi-state operator that just does everything and creates every product in every category. So again, that may not be the popular opinion. It may not be the opinion of all operators, but it's ours, and we're going to go with it for a while and see what happens.
Well, it strikes me that, you know, you've referenced a couple of times how we don't really know how this industry is really going to shake out. We're still early. People talk about CPG and all these other things, right? But your willingness to partner with, on the whole, with brands. You have your own brand at a retail, different brands on the shops, and then you have the wholesale strategy, and you're partnering with other MSOs, you're partnering with social equity brands, you're partnering with the Tysons of the world. So if you were to look at that and say, 2, 3, 5 years from now, I guess the way I'll ask the question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? Where do you think, I mean, you're open, you're flexible, but are you CPG? Is that the word that you guys sit around in the boardroom and say, we're CPG, right? Yeah, we're CPG. Like, where does that land?
I think you sit around right now in a room and you look at each other, and if you're honest, it's like, okay, we did 10 things today. 3 of them felt like a CPG. 2 of them felt like a technology startup. 3 of them felt like a, Bonnie Plant Farms or a cultivation facility, right? And then how many am I at? 8. 2 of them felt, I don't even know, pharmaceutical, right? So it's like on any given day, I think you're doing things. This is what's so interesting and so unique about this industry. I use this parallel. I came from, prior to this, I was in social for a long time. And really early on, like pre-news feed for Facebook, and saw the emergence and the rise of ad tech, and we built some cool companies. We did some really cool stuff. We all knew early on that was going to fundamentally change the way that people communicated with each other. We didn't know exactly how. We didn't know that it was going to, alter elections, or that it was going to do all of this, other stuff that it eventually did. But we all knew that it was going to be a change. So do you look at that and say, well, we're a television company? Well, no, not really. I mean, you have video, but you're not really TV. You can one-to-one target. Okay, so we are a direct mail company. Well, you're definitely not a direct mail company, right? Well, then we're a .com. You are a combination and a sum of many, many things that have come before you that have led to something new. And I think this industry has the blessing and the curse of understanding that we are going to be the combination, sum of parts of many different sort of industries that have happened before. So we can garner from some of their best practices and their learnings, but the way in which those come together and create the sort of unique thing that we will be, I would challenge anyone to definitively tell me exactly what it's going to look like, because I don't know. And so I think it's TBD, but there are aspects of many different industries and legacy operations that on a daily basis we touch and we make decisions like.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I mean, I think there's probably an investor presentation from 2016 somewhere that put a stake in the ground, but as we've all experienced, it's like that's a moving target, and if you're not flexible, you're not going to succeed. We've got some good questions here, and frankly, I'll share that like a lot of people really like your mojo and how you're coming at this. And I'm going to take this question here, and I'm going to rephrase it a little bit because you've talked about it. But they said, what interests you in like, why would you want to partner with us, and how would you invest in us? And I don't think the money, it's a question about investing capital, but it's more mentoring and growing a small brand from an outside state. Like, is that part of like when you look at this and say, okay, I think these guys really got something here, but they're a little rough around the ridges, they're immature, what have you? How do you think about making those investments in those brands from a mentorship, from a really good partner? Like, hey, I'm going to help you because I really believe in what you're doing.
Okay, so here's my secret. I'm actually not that great at anything, but I have the best team in the industry, zero question. So I think that the part that becomes really fun in these conversations with these brands is like, I have a head of communications that can fix a lot of your problems in communications. I have a head of marketing. I've got a head of retail marketing. I've got, a head of creative and innovation and technology. We have all of these incredible people in our organization that we got to pay them anyway. So if you're a brand and you're coming in, it's sort of like, well, let me introduce you to so-and-so. And they can probably provide you some guidance on the way that we think about modularity when it comes to creating packaging, or the way that we think about how to create content on social, or the way that we work within the regulatory frameworks of this state, right? So I think, again, talking about that sort of concept of an incubator, I think we really do embrace that. We really lean into it. If there is anyone from any of my teams on right now, they're going to be terrified, because they're going to be like, oh my God, we're going to have 25 more conversations next week, and Jesse's going to be super excited. We're going to have all of them, which is probably going to be the case. So I'll warn everybody now. I think it's a great question. Whoever sent that question, send me an email. I want to talk to you. I don't even know what your brand is or what you do yet, but I want to talk to you. So send me an email at jesse@cannabistcompany.com and put in the subject line, that was my question. And I want to talk to you, because I think we need to talk to as many of those brands as possible, because we have the resources to try to help them. Whether or not we'll be a fit, don't know, but we're happy to dive in and check it out.
Cool. Awesome. So similar question, or at least a related question. The question is simply, since you are vertically integrated, what does the brand that you're partnering with me provide? Are we providing the packaging, the non-THC ingredients, the formulation, the training? Like, what are we supposed to bring to the table?
Depends on what your brand is and what your product is and where you are in your life cycle, right? Everybody brings something a little bit different. I can tell you the question about what do you want to be when you grow up? So again, technology background, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail, so I apologize. But Salesforce, great company. Why is it a great company? Because they didn't try to build everything. Salesforce Marketplace is the home for every single thing that you could possibly want to run a sales team. And they are third-party companies that you integrate into that base CRM, that platform, that allows you to go to one place and get everything that you need, right? So if we, as a vertically integrated operator, have a retail platform and we have a cultivation and manufacturing footprint, we theoretically could be Salesforce. We could be one place that you come to for everything that you need. We should not try to solve every consumer problem. So what you bring, what your brand and your product brings, is one of those applications in the marketplace. It's like, hey, if someone comes in here and they're looking for this, I've got it covered. So you should put me in your marketplace, right? And that's one consumer that we serve that day that's happy because we had X, right? If there's enough of a use case and there's enough of a synergy and alignment, we're going to add you to our marketplace. Like that should be the way that we look at it. So what are you going to bring? I don't know, TBD. You got to bring something. Hopefully it's a unique perspective, a unique product, a driven management team, an authentic story or view on where this industry is going. Let's just start there. And we can figure the rest out.
So a lot of people ask me, or I've even asked a lot of MSOs over the years with varying responses, is how do you think about brands? Can brands be manufactured in the boardroom, or are brands really more authentic in their development? It seems to me like you would say we are not sitting around in the board saying, okay, we're CPG and we can manufacture our own brands and we can do this alone. I mean, boardroom, you have, of all the brands you have, you did create a few of them that have gotten a lot of traction. But as a percentage of your overall business, it sounds like, to your beginning point, that you're not sitting around saying we can manufacture brands and we don't need, we've got all this money and, we're Diageo, right, of cannabis, right? You're actually quite the contrary. Like, how do you see that evolving in terms of, do you think it accelerates more so that it's more third-party brands and less Cannabist Company brands, or vice versa? Any vision there?
So we do both, right? And again, like we have to do both, right? We do both. But when we do the one that you're talking about, the boardroom brands, the approach that we try to take is not, let's just build a brand because we're going to build a brand and we'll just throw it in the market, right? We have an incredible team on the cultivation and manufacturing side in the back of house. More often than not, our brands are a result of them bringing us something and saying, look at what we did. We need a home for this. Our job as a commercial marketing and growth organization is to give them a home. So in the beginning, we scrambled around and we created some of the larger brand architectures to make sure that products had a home. But then what you start to see, like with Amber, Amber was a purpose-driven brand that was specifically created because of the innovation on the West Coast out of the Balboa facility in California. They were coming up with these incredible live resin products, and they're like, we need a brand to put these products in. And we said, great, let's go with Amber. And we designed a brand around it, and it resonated, and people love it, and it's awesome. But that is, you know, press. We created these great hard press tablets. What do we do with them? Let's put them in a brand. And we're going to call that brand Press. And now Press has 3 outcome-based formulations of rally dose and snooze, or rally dose and whatever. I think it's snooze. But so those architectures, those brand architectures, are a direct result of the innovation of our internal team. So to your point, do we sit around in a boardroom and say, we need another brand? Nope. But as a management team, when our team creates something that needs somewhere to live, we have to provide them with brands. So that is when we talk about competing for shelf space, I am very confident in our cultivation and manufacturing team's ability to compete with anyone when it comes to product quality and innovation. So then our job is to make sure that they have a home to put those.
So the cream rises to the top, whether it's internally developed, externally developed, you know, and there's a lot of ways that can come in. One question here is, would you ever consider partnering with a brand prior to them having truly launched in their home market? Or would you help a company, brand new visionary brand, launch?
Yes, but it would have to be pretty special. Like, if we're being honest, cups runneth over right now, and we are not nearly as sort of resource rich as we were in the past. Just the climate and everything that's going on, we have to be a little bit more focused in the things that we can do, and we have a limited bandwidth from a team point of view. If it's really special, and again, special is so subjective. That can come across as so condescending, right? Like, you may come to me with something that's incredibly special. It's just not my special. It's not our moment right now. But if it's something that just is like undeniably, we have to figure out a way to make that fit, I will figure out a way to make it fit.
Nice. Last question, because this has been tremendous. But given the MSO playbook is often around vertical integration, I always get approached by brands that are saying, can you sell me to the Cannabist Company? Can you sell me to an MSO? What are the considerations for you in terms of making an acquisition of a pure brand? And is that something that is on your radar in 2024?
Not right now. If I was a brand right now, it's not a great time to sell a brand unless you have a very strategic sort of opportunity and a strategic position. So we are engaged in some conversations with some brands that may or may not be a fit. They're not big acquisitions. They're not big dollar amounts, right, per se. They're more sort of growth structures for the future of, okay, let's bring you in and let's figure out how to grow you and make sure that everybody gets something out of it, right? But from a straight just acquisition of a brand point of view, I would survive till 25. Figure out a way to hang in there and survive. Like, partner with someone like me who's open to just partnering with you and trying to build your brand further. And then, Godspeed. I hope you sell it for 10 times as much in 2 years, but it's not going to be a great check from anyone right now.
Jesse Channon, Chief Commercial Officer of the Cannabist Company, you have been an absolutely dynamite guest. Thank you so much for coming on. Ton of learning here from our entire crowd, me included. So this was great. Appreciate you. And to everyone out there, yes, December 13th will be the next event. We'll look forward to having all of you hopefully come back and join, because obviously there's a lot of great content from people like Jesse Channon. Thank you, sir. Everyone have a great day. We'll look forward to continuing soon. All righty. Bye-bye. Cheers.